as an individual training, there is no way that you can do those insane workouts or those insane events back to back to back to back, like, 8 to 18 hours a day, like for 3 weeks. You just can't imagine the effect of back-to-back workouts day in, day out, day after day, through weekends, like no weekends off, 3 weeks straight, 2 to 4 hours sleep. You're never going to replicate that. And that's why I say, they push you way past anything you thought possible based on the fuel they envisioned using to get to Mars. And they even said when they listed that year,
Mhm.
2032, they were like, we don't know the fuel that's going to take the first crew to Mars yet.
Mhm.
We're still working on that. The fuel we have right now, 17 months-ish, we're guessing.
Mhm.
But between magnetic and all the discoveries in quantum physics in the last decade, like it's a very exciting path.
And one of the guys that I spoke with, this amazing guy named RJ Casey, he was very soft spoken, like about my height, small build, kind of a surfer guy, and also one of the most lethal people on the face of the earth.
Copy 200 and braced.
Splashdown of Crew 5.
Hello and good morning. Today we have a very interesting podcast episode with a truly very interesting individual as well. His name is RJ Casey. We recently met during the Whitefish Security Summit in Montana, and we even had the chance to do PT in the morning in the freezing cold Montana Lake, which was definitely a bonding experience. So now we have him on the podcast. So a bit more about him, and then I'll let him introduce himself as well. So he spent like 30 years more or less in special operations within the US Army, within the Air Force. He also now is working with SpaceX, and he also had various roles within NASA. And being a Renaissance man, he also got into Hollywood as a stuntman and military advisor, and for many very big films such as Inception, Dunkirk, Extraction 2. I mean, the list goes on. So truly a special individual. And something I wanted to highlight to begin as well is that he dedicates quite a bit of time on non-profits. He's a co-founder of a bourbon brand which helps support veterans, especially veterans which might be going through some tough times and want to build experiences. We can get into that more in a second as well. And he works with an organization called Force Blue as well, which also supports veterans and ocean conservation. So, RJ, it's great to speak with you. Good morning.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it too. Yeah, I was very fortunate at a young age. My dad was a fighter pilot, so I kind of grew up in the military environment, moving from base to base every year to every 2 years. I felt very lucky to have my first foundational 4 years in San Antonio, Texas.
Mhm.
And I still think of Texas as home. My mom was born in El Paso. My dad was born in Madison, Wisconsin, and they did the whole officer and a gentleman thing when he was in flight school down in Laredo, Texas. And the adventure started there, I think. Um, and then I just kind of always thought I would serve my country. And there was a few things as a teenager that led me to going to special forces school. All my time in the military, to be clear, all my time is guard and reserve, which means part-time. And all my units that I've been in have had full-time slots, but I really enjoyed the freedom and the flexibility of the guard and reserve. You go to all the active duty special operations courses, and in the guard, I got to go to a lot more schools than the guys on active duty just because I kept my physical current and I bugged the hell out of my buddy Tom Workman, who was the training NCO. He was the glue that held that unit together, really.
Mhm.
He cut every order for every trip and for every school. So I was like, Tom, what's going on? And somebody invariably would get injured, and I would be the only one with a current physical. and had the time to go. So I got to go to Halo school and scuba school and ended up having a really, really bad injury in the mid 90s.
Mhm.
And that diverted me from a track that I thought I would stay on, which was Special Forces officer, trying out for one of the Tier 1 units as an officer. But that injury gave me 11 months to think about what I really wanted to do, what I was really interested in, especially after a surgeon said, RJ, you're never going to walk normal again. And this is before he even did the surgery. Um, my reaction was pretty visceral. I was like, man, why don't you just cut, do your damn job, and let me worry about what happens after that. But after 11 months, I was like, I want to go medicine. My plan was to drop my first commission, go to the Special Forces medical course, see if I really like medicine as much as I thought, stay on a team in the Guard as a medic while I went through med school at West Virginia University. And after a couple of trips as a medic and really, really enjoying that job, um, I got picked up for the Inter Service Physician Assistant program. And I had been contracting before, but not seriously, just a random trip here or there with various companies that were basically executing contracts for different agencies. But after PA school, I really started to focus on before the planes hit the towers. I was on a contract 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off in Colombia with a combat search and rescue package. And then after 9/11, obviously everybody's shift kind of diverted over to Central Asia and the Middle East. So
Yes.
kind of my start.
So then, from what I can hear, your transition into the medical field within special operations came primarily because of the injury, right? If not, you would have continued more traditionally.
I think so. Yeah. Who knows? But yeah, there was a lot of forks in the road along the way. Um, and I think there was a lot of transitions. They kept it interesting. Like I went through a selection every 5 to 10 years. They were just, selections are as challenging as you read about and see on TV and some of the different shows on selections making the cut and some other things.
Mm.
There's no way to articulate how insane those are, and there's no real way to train for it. You can be physically ready, or you can think that you're physically ready, but the mental part of it and the difference between guys that pass and don't pass is just saying, I'm doing whatever it takes to get this job. Like, I'm going to do whatever they tell me to do, and I don't care what it is. And as soon as you flip that switch and I don't care, bring it, like, send it and see what happens.
Mm.
Um, I think a lot of guys start questioning, I don't know if I can do this. And that leads to, I think that's a healthy question. I don't know if I can do something that they're telling me to do physically. Like I've never done that before. Every selection you're doing, you're going way past what you thought was possible. The problem is when the person says, I can't do that. And as soon as he has that word can't in his brain, it starts growing like a weed and it just strangles their dreams. Like it's bad. Um, but I was always, you know, I think I was always in wonder as I'm going through these courses, like, wow, I can't believe I'm getting to do this. And they're paying me to work out, and I'm joining this incredibly exciting career field, this storied history, and hopefully one day I get to be a part of it. And
Mhm.
it was very exciting to me. So I enjoyed those processes. And as I got older and went through them, it wasn't so much a mental thing. It was like, wow, I wonder if I can still do this physically. Because at 35 and 45, going through a course with a 90% attrition rate, you're wondering if your body can take it. So a lot of different challenges during every course, but they've all been amazing. And it's been an honor to serve for sure.
Amazing. Look, I know many people are fascinated by the selection process, as you mentioned, the training, the weeding out phase of especially special operations. Many people look at documentaries online and see how it is, but as you said, probably being there captures it best when you're only in your head, and you have to continue for hours and hours. So, do you have something like interesting story about that, or what people can imagine if they do decide to pursue this career in for the initial stages.
Yeah, I actually tell kids, imagine when you're carrying a rucksack with 60 pounds in it and you're on a beach, like New Smyrna Beach in Florida, like the guys train if you happen to live in Florida or the mountains of West Virginia and you're hiking. I think a lot of people waste half of that time not doing the mental part of it. And I think if you're training something, you should be imagining, like, let's say, 10 years ago or 20 years ago, when guys were training, I would say, hey, look, imagine you're in the worst situations imaginable from different movies and that you have to do whatever it takes to get through them. And don't think about mountains or hills in West Virginia. Think about mountains of Afghanistan. Like mentally know that's what you're doing this for. Don't listen to music. Don't think about you're going on a date that night to some dinner you can't afford because you want to impress her, like really focus on what you're doing all of it for. Because I think that mental training helps you and it helps you envision making it through those processes. And one of the things I don't think people can imagine is the logistics it takes to be an instructor, to have the logistical resources to run those schedules. Because as an individual training, there is no way that you can do those insane workouts or those insane events back to back to back to back, like, 8 to 18 hours a day, like for 3 weeks. You just can't imagine the effect of back to back workouts, day in, day out, day after day, through weekends, like no weekends off, 3 weeks straight, 2 to 4 hours sleep. You're never going to replicate that. And that's why I say, they push you way past anything you thought possible or anything you've done in the past. There's just no way to replicate it. So I think that's a huge part of it, the mental training while you're physically training, and then understanding there's no way you're going to be totally ready for what they're going to put in front of you.
Would you say you developed a thicker skin?
I think you get the thicker skin in the locker room later. We're- Yeah, we've all been, there's a lot of alpha, a lot of testosterone, a lot of there's a lot of different egos and everyone's at a different stage in their life and different age. So usually the loudest guy in the room is the least experienced. The quietest guy in the room is the most experienced. And then there's guys that just constantly give each other crap, and that's pretty funny. But you got to be able to, understand that humor is a big part of our culture. And in combat, invariably funny things are going to happen. And you have to enjoy the different, uh, you have to keep your sense of humor in all situations, from training all the way into some of the worst firefights you've ever been in. So that's a big part of it. So developing thick skin is definitely part of that whole process of special operations, no matter what team you're on.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
know many develop a dark sense of humor as well, especially if they went on various operations, right? Because it's the only thing you have, I guess, in those situations, especially when you have little hope, etc. It's only humor that you've got, right, to keep yourself up. All right.
Oh,
So then, when I got sent the different stunts that you do, etc., it was a long list of perhaps 100 different things, right? From everything from the different vehicles that you would be able to drive up to, like you mentioned, scuba diving. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So you're quite a competent man in that aspect. Um, and I think that makes you quite special. So how come you decided to pursue all these different endeavors and these different hobbies along the way, which all link back to special operations or the military and then Hollywood, perhaps?
a really good friend of mine, Clint Bruce, he's kind of my spirit animal, and he kind of calls me his spirit animal. But he said, "I've never met someone more curious than you," and I
Mm,
had never really thought of it that way. I was like, What are you talking about?" He goes, Bro, you had to be curious about like all these different things that you're involved in. Like, I can't think of another word that would capture somebody that would go through all those processes, and be involved in all those different industries, that's curiosity. I was like, wow, I never really thought about that. But I'll take an example. So Force Blue, you mentioned, it's this amazing nonprofit. They take combat divers from the military, repurpose and reskill them specifically as scientific divers
Mm.
for marine conservation projects. So how I got involved with them was a friend of mine, Roger Sparks. I saw a video of them doing coral restoration down in Florida, and I was like, that is really interesting. I want to know more about that. And so I got a hold of Roger Sparks, he was a former Marine Recon turned PJ. He was on active duty for a pump, and then he went up to the Alaska team, which is a very famous team in the pararescue career field because they do rescues every single week from bear maulings to downed aircraft on glaciers. So it's a very technical environment up there, and rescues are happening every single week, a
Mhm.
couple times a week at least. So, anyways, I would call Roger and I was like, "Hey, man, tell me more about this force, please." He goes, "Oh, it's incredible," and he just started talking about the work they do, and I was like, "How do I get involved?" And he goes, "Actually, we need people, so." Here, call this guy. And so I called Angelo Fiore, and he's the director of dive operations. And he said, "Hey, what's your background in diving and maritime?" And so I told him, and he goes, "Send me a resume, and I'll get back to you." And so the first trip you do, the first trip you do at Force Blue is on you,
Mhm.
because it's kind of your job interview. So you go down there. They usually put you in a hotel room, but travel, like for me, I drove down to Key Biscayne and got involved with the 100 Yards of Hope. And it was an amazing project sponsored by the NFL literally paid for the whole thing. And they paid us to do an environmental project because their Super Bowl was down in Tampa. So they'll pay a nonprofit to do some kind of conservation project in the city or around the city they're in. And then, they advertise, hey, this is what we did in Tampa, or this is what we did in Miami. So we were lucky to have back-to-back Super Bowls in Florida. And that was very marine conservation friendly, and we got to do a lot of work. Um, and it's just amazing. But to see something and go, oh, I want to know more about that, or that looks interesting. I think I want to be involved. Let me find out more information. And you start digging and doing your own homework and talking to people and making a decision on whether that's worth your time. Um, does that make you excited? Uh, does it feel like work, or does it feel like you're actually doing something exciting, you know? So I think that's happened, and I've never gotten involved in anything unless I had a feeling of, man, that seems like something I want to be involved in. Whether it's bourbon or whether it's stunt work or, whether it's working with astronauts, during their recovery, um, and helping them when things don't go as planned. So we train them up before they go up, and get them ready for their mission. If they're a few degrees off, they're going to land way out in the middle of nowhere. And usually it's going to be ocean, but it could be land. So we kind of prepare them for the different scenarios that might happen to them. And then we show them what it looks like uh, when it, um, excuse me just 1 second. We show them kind of what it looks like when it happens exactly as planned, when they land right where they're supposed to within a meter, how fast we're going to get to them, what it's going to look like us pulling them out of the capsule after being in space for 6+ months. And, it's, I love that community. They're just a cool culture. And the whole space thing is fascinating. And I think one of the first, this will lead into another industry, but one of the first movies I ever saw, like I didn't realize J.J. Abrams and I were the same age. But I was at a premiere in LA, thanks to Oscar Isaac. He had a spare ticket. And I think I posted something where he realized I was in LA. He goes, "Bro, you're in LA? Hey, I have a spare ticket. Come to, we're doing a Star Wars premiere." And J.J. Abrams got on stage with all the actors and he said, Some of my love of movies came from the original Star Wars that came out. Star Wars, it was episode 4. They filmed that first and they premiered it first. And there were lines wrapped around the theater. And I got in there and I'd just never seen anything like it. And he talked about holding his dad's hand in this massive line that wrapped around the theater. And that's exactly where I was. I was 10 years old and I saw Star Wars. So the whole space thing is, space exploration is fascinating to me. So, um, and I guess a lot of things, whether it was conscious or subconscious, affected me along the way. And that made different decisions for me or helped me stay informed and excited about different industries that I ended up being involved with.
Amazing. It made me think back to I had one professor which once told me, find as many things in life that you like or love, and that will create a nice existence, from the morning coffee to perhaps going scuba diving. I mean, all these different things, if you add them together, if you, for example, only like American football, right? That's your only thing, then, that's great, but it's definitely you're more holistic and you might have a more happy existence if you find many, many different things that you enjoy doing and that you can get to do perhaps on a day to day. So you mentioned space, so I think we should I'll ask you a question about space. That'd definitely be great. So you work with SpaceX, you also work with NASA.
Mhm.
So how do you see space exploration at the moment from a perspective? I mean, you're not an astronaut, but you help astronauts yourself, right? How is that for you? First, how did you grip the industry? And it's such a large one with so many very smart individuals within the field. How do you feel working together with them, and how do you see the future of space?
I I kind of heard the first map of getting to Mars, like the years that it was going to take. And there's obviously, setbacks, and that is direct reflection of who's in the Oval Office. They wield a lot of power when it comes to NASA and the near plans and the far plans.
Mhm.
So everyone in the administration, because our government is funding all of it, that affects them greatly. Um, so I think there was a movie called Ad Astra, and it was with Brad Pitt, and that was one of the movies that talked about a space station on the moon
Mhm.
and launching from there to deep space. So I think that's a pretty cool first look at how it could go. Um, but space between 2001 Space Odyssey and Interstellar by Christopher Nolan, uh, those are just amazing looks into space and quantum physics.
Mhm.
Um, and I think a lot of things that happen, like if you can imagine it, you can do it. So I think movies affect not just space, because those visions are very important when they hit certain kids at certain ages or certain teenagers. And these guys grow up to want to be an astronaut based on what they've seen, what they've heard. It's not something that you're born and you're like, I want to go, I want to leave the planet. Someone has to show you a vision, tell you what's possible, and then you work towards that goal to be an astronaut and do space exploration. For me, I've just always been fascinated with what's out there. Like, are we alone? Like the basic questions we all ask growing up. And I'm just fascinated with the search of it. And in pararescue, they have a big history of recovering astronauts when they come home. It was a balance back in the 60s and 70s between Navy SEALs and Air Force pararescue. So it's one of our missions, like one of our core missions, and that others may live, personnel recovery. Um, that's any environment, any situation, anywhere at any time. And that there's astronaut components of one of those scenarios that we train for. So I felt very lucky to like specifically train for that. And then I was on the Florida team when a flight surgeon tried out for NASA. Um, and he went up against Johnny Kim, and both their resumes were just crazy off the chart. And on that go, Johnny Kim, um, took the primary slot, and they offered the alternate slot to a really good friend of mine now, Anil Menon. But at the time, when they offered it to him, he's like, I know what alternate means. I want to go to space still, and I just don't see that. So I've done my homework about space and who of all the different, civilian companies, like SpaceX is head and shoulders above everybody. And I'm going to go there. And he wrote a white paper and he basically said, hey, just so you know, um, you're talking about launching billionaires into space. So those are non-military personnel. Those are non-NASA astronauts. And you not only don't have a medical director, but you don't have a way to recover those astronauts. And they were like, well, yeah, but the military will, right? And I was like, no. I'm like, no, absolutely. There's no way they're going to do that. You need to recover those yourself. And if you're a billionaire and you're paying that much money to go to space, you better have red carpet treatment throughout the whole process. And that includes when you return.
Yeah.
So, integration back to, getting back from space, getting back to your family, getting back to your life. Yeah, that's really important. And I can help you build all of that. So you're welcome and hire me. Here's my ask. And so they worked an arrangement. And so he was the first medical director for NASA or for SpaceX, excuse me.
Hmm.
His first hire was a really good friend of all of ours in the PJ career field. It was a guy named Brent Manny. Brent Manny is almost like the pararescue historian, especially when it comes to space. Um, So he was working at Det 3 at Patrick Space Force Base. And being stationed down there, I got to know him a lot better than I did, just as a career icon, career field icon that Brent was. And he calls me out of the blue one day. He goes, RJ, there's no way I can take this job, but Anil just called me and offered me this amazing job, like to help build this whole rescue and recovery team. I think you'd be perfect, but if it's not going to be you, I dare you to pick someone else and send that number to Anil. And I was like, no way. I'm calling Anil. That sounds amazing, and I'd love to help build that. So Anil and I talked over, the span of a couple weeks, and I made him realize that there's no way they could pay me enough to live in LA and be a full-time person at SpaceX. I said, look, you guys aren't going to launch humans for a while. Let's build this team. Hire me as a contractor. I can live anywhere I want. And whenever human spaceflight happens, I will, you know, I'll bring the team and together we'll, have a good plan for recovering those billionaires. And so we did. And we ended up working with Bob and Doug. They were the first two Americans to launch from Florida in decades. And that was the first Dragon capsule launch with humans in it. So that was pretty historic. And then it went from there. I want to say we're on crew, God, 13 or 14 now, but a lot's happened. Artemis 2 just went up, um, and that's the first of many, many flights to get to the moon and start building that space station, build it out, and then start preparing for the launch to Mars. So it's very, very exciting.
That's amazing. I'm sure it's on your list still to go into space, right? And then perhaps to go and visit the moon, or what
Yeah,
do you say?
honestly, I think it was like right around crew 3.
Mhm.
And there was a map, or a map on the calendar, I should say, that I think it was 2027, start building a space station on the moon. By 2029, it was going to be fully manned 24/7 and built and finalized. And 2032 was going to be the year we launched to Mars. And then sometime, 17 months or whatever it was at the time, based on the fuel they envisioned using to get to Mars. And they even said when they listed that year,
Mhm.
2032, they were like, we don't know the fuel that's going to take the first crew to Mars yet.
Mhm.
We're still working on that. The fuel we have right now, 17 months-ish, we're guessing.
Mhm.
But between magnetic, and all the discoveries in quantum physics in the last decade. Like it's a very exciting path. But I sat my guys down and I was like, hey, you guys need to wake up. If you think we're only going to be recovering astronauts here, you're wrong. They're going to build a space station. It's going to have a government clinic. It's going to have a SpaceX clinic, and guys like us are going to man it. And there will be a mission to go outside that clinic and recover astronauts. Like, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know where you thought this was going, but it's not just grabbing guys off the coast of Florida. Like it's going to be the full meal deal soon. And I'll tell you right now, between me, you, and your crowd, when they start launching humans in Starship, that is going to exponentially change the whole game. Like
Mm.
between cargo and humans, like the capacity of Starship from SpaceX is insane. And that's what's really going to light this candle,
Mm.
accelerate the process.
It's so fascinating. As you mentioned, even if one gets into the scientific domain, I mean, it can get so interesting as well. So I know that we have limited time, so there's still a couple of things that we have to discuss, or we get to discuss. And so let's make the switch to Hollywood. I think that'd be interesting. So being that you served, I think in four continents, right?
Yeah.
Within special operations. Um, how was it then working with folks at Hollywood? Because I know they're perhaps wired a bit differently than special operation folks, right? So how was it working with them and working with Christopher Nolan and how was that?
Uh, as soon as you mentioned the name Christopher Nolan, I can't help but smile. The, just this iconic filmmaker, dreamer, storyteller. He's so fun to work with, him and his wife both. And it takes them both to run that whole dream that they do every couple of years. No matter what, and God, I wanted to work on Odyssey so bad because I knew there was going to be a lot of maritime scenes. And I even emailed a couple guys. Uh, let's see, Odyssey would have been, yeah. So Oppenheimer was very light on the kind of military advising I'm involved in. They needed like military historians to help with
Right.
that. And Oppenheimer was amazing. Before that was Tenet, and we had just come off Dunkirk. Tenet would be his next movie, and I got a call, and unfortunately, they called me a little too late. The only time I've ever turned down a movie turned out to be I had to turn down three movies. So in the military, when you're in the reserves or the guard, they ask you about a year and a half out. Um, they say, "Hey, we've got a deployment coming up. Do you want to be on it?" And you say, "Yeah, I got nothing planned in a year and a half. Yeah, of course I want to help. I want to serve, and this is what we're in this unit for. So yes, I will go on that deployment." About a year out, they ask you again, and you say yes. At 6 months, so at each time they ask you, those two times, you can say, no, I don't want to go. And there's plenty of PJs and there's plenty of combat rescue officers that do want to deploy. So at the year, they're kind of checking in with you, going, hey, you're still going, right? And you say yes or no. And based on that, they either find a guy, put it in your slot, and there's plenty of people to fill those slots. So you don't have to go on every deployment. And that's also the beauty and the flexibility of the Guard and Reserve. Um, at the 6 month mark, when you say yes, they were like, okay, you're on it. Unless you break something, you're in the hospital, or you have a critical family emergency, you're going, whether you want to or not, and whether some better deal comes up or not. So when Christopher Nolan calls you at 3 months, and he didn't call me personally, but his team reached out to me and goes, "Hey, we really need, we have this one huge military scene we need your help with, and we need help getting aircraft. We want four tilted rotary and four Chinooks, CH-47." So I was like, okay, like let me call around in the military and see if we can get their support. Um, Getting support from the military means you have to follow their regulations. Um, so I'll tell you what to do if they say yes. they will support it. And then I'll tell you what's involved. But at that point, it'll almost be free. So you're going to save a lot of money. Oh, this is great, RJ. Great. So, well, when's the military scene going to shoot? It's in October in 2019. And I was like, "Ugh." So I didn't make those noises on the phone, but I was like, dang it. Because that was right in the middle of a deployment that I was locked into. And I said, hey, look, and if it gets pushed, I might be able to help you and be on production, be on set, and get you through that scene. Take the guys through rehearsal and actually shoot film on it. However, right now I'm scheduled to deploy. Um, so unless something crazy happens, I'm not going to be able to make October. Um, I might be able to make mid-December, but that's it. They're like, yeah, we're pretty locked in for October. And Christopher Nolan's schedule's down to like he has a reputation for finishing early and under budget. And there's very few directors that do that because his planning is so meticulous. I think because he writes it, he sees each scene in his mind hundreds of times before he actually shoots it. So when you know what you need, um, and you know when you have it after you shoot it, based on what the camera is showing you and what the action has shown you, like he's a very aggressive director in the best possible way. Like I don't think I've ever seen him shoot from one angle for more than like 3 to 5 takes. I think five is the absolute most I've ever seen him shoot from one direction. It's crazy. He's lightning fast. And I think it is because he knows exactly what he wants, and then he knows, even more importantly, exactly when he has it. So it's kind of cool to work with him. But I said, hey, look, I can't make October, but I've got several friends that I would trust with this. Um, do you want any recommendation? No, RJ, we have it. We wanted to give you first option. The team really likes working with you, and it's no problem. We'll call you for the next one. Okay. So let me help you with the aircraft. So I did that during their pre-production time and before I left. And I had a really mad stunt coordinator named George Cottle call me from Joshua Tree going, RJ, I was told you were on this. I didn't have to worry about the scene. Where the hell are you? And I was like, well, I'm kind of busy. He goes, if you're on another movie, I was like, no, no, didn't Matt tell you? Because I helped a friend, Matthew Marsden, get on that show. And he handed the phone to George, who was like, where's RJ? He goes, let me call him. Here you go. And he goes, where are you right now? And I said, dude, I'm in Iraq. We're about to fly to Syria. Like, I'm deployed. Holy shit, are you okay? And then he was worried. But the guy they had um, wasn't doing it for him, I guess. Or he was worried. He goes, I don't even know this guy was in the military, but I think they ended up using that guy on the Odyssey. And what I couldn't wait to bring to the Odyssey, because I'm a huge Homer fan, the Iliad and the Odyssey. And I couldn't wait to see what he was. I couldn't wait to read the script, actually. I was almost more excited to read the script to see what he created than to help with the movie, but I wanted to do both. So I called and I said, hey, if you guys need help with veteran mentality or veteran, you know, how they handle themselves in different situations mentality, I'd be honored to help with this movie. And they had already picked somebody, probably because I said I couldn't work on Tenet, but Christopher Nolan and Emma, his wife, are just they're the coolest couple I've ever met in Hollywood. At that level, at the production level, like they really take care of their teams. They really are thoughtful, and things happen on set all the time where it shouldn't happen. And that's just part of the movie business. Whether it's weather, whether it's lighting that takes way too long to get ready because of some issue that nobody could have foreseen. Every single movie has issues. And between the two of them, they just handle it. Um, and they handle it really lightning fast. Like if something happens and he wanted to shoot a scene and it's going to take too long, he will completely pivot and his teams are all were all ready for pivots because they happen all the time. And instead of shooting a ground or a beach scene, we'll shoot aerial scenes and be like, "Hey, everybody, 20 minutes. We'll be at the airport. We're going to shoot aerial for the rest of the day. Ground, you sort this out. We're going to be back tomorrow morning. Don't disappoint me. We'll be back. Everyone else, get to the airport." So he's he's fun to work with like that. But it is a lot like the military. There is a lot of hurry up and wait with seconds of like life-threatening danger on stunt side. And it's just a really cool process. The guy who got me into the movies, one of the first movies I was ever on was Terminator Salvation. And a former pararescue instructor actually got me on that set. And I got him into one of the agencies. So he had to go for a month and try out. And I took his place while during Terminator Salvation. And that's where I met Tom Struthers, who was Christopher Nolan's stunt coordinator for many movies. And George Cottle has done the last few. So I imagine George will be doing that. But Christopher Nolan doesn't have a second unit. So for stunt coordinators, the progression is usually stuntman, stunt double at a high level, or getting involved as an assistant stunt coordinator, stunt coordinating, and then second unit directing. And then some of those second unit directors, like Sam Hargrave, the guys involved with John Wick, like Sam Hargrave, I met him on Extraction franchise, and he is a pure stuntman that progressed all the way up to the director.
Mm.
And that's a pretty hard transition to make, but with Christopher Nolan only having one unit, at some point those stunt coordinators step away to second unit direct, and it's good and bad. Like it's so fun to work with Christopher Nolan and all his teams. Um, but if you do want to progress and you do want to second unit direct and then on to director, there's no other way to do it. So, but the movie industry is incredibly exciting. Every movie's different. Uh, every different stunt sequence is different, and each stunt coordinator has a unique approach to it. They hear about the stunts that are going to be on that movie, and then they assemble a team to attack every one of those technical sequences. So it's pretty cool, and you get to work with guys like Chris O'Hara. Vic Armstrong is just such this legend. Here's a guy who doubled Superman and met his wife who was doubling Lois Lane. They get married and they're this stunt like royalty, couple. Um, and I'm on the advisory board for Round Top Film Festival, and I gave we at the Round Top Film Festival gave Vic Armstrong a Lifetime Achievement Award in stunts, and this next year, don't tell anybody, but we're gonna do the same honor for his wife because
Mm.
they just hundreds and hundreds of just crazy iconic shows. So, anyways, yeah, obviously, again, everything that I'm involved with, whether it's Brigand's Co. and creating communities and helping veterans, or being a co-founder of Four Branches Bourbon, creating this amazing bourbon with guys like Steve Nally and Greg Schneider, like these iconic, just bourbon legends out in Kentucky. And we end up giving back a lot of money. Tonight, I'm going to be at an event with a really good friend of mine who I've known over 30 years, which is weird to say. But HB Gillum, he's on the board of trust for the Special Forces Charitable Trust, and they have an event in Southern Pines, North Carolina. So I'll be there for that. And then I'm going to meet my co-founders at Four Branches Bourbon. We're all assembling out in Bardstown, Kentucky, at Bardstown Bourbon Company, whose CEO is a former Delta Force commander, and Steve Nally is their master distiller, a 50-year Bourbon Hall of Fame legend. Greg Schneider is going to be joining us on camera, and we're one of three teams out of a couple thousand made in America companies that entered this contest. So we're in the top three. So I guess they're sending a crew down from New York, and they're going to capture kind of what we do when we do a new fill and capture part of our bourbon business to show that. But it's all these different industries. I can't wait to go to work because it really doesn't feel like work. It feels like we're helping people. It feels like we're doing something, for Force Blue, like marine conservation, like saving the planet. What's better than that? And scuba diving is one of my passions as well, and I get to one thing I don't think they understand isn't, well, I know Jim does now because we've talked about it multiple times, and it's not just me, but everyone involved with Force Blue in between tanks doing all this work underwater. We are on this boat together, and a lot of like therapeutic conversations take place there. Like it's incredibly cathartic and amazing. So you're not just helping, with marine conservation and, basically helping save the planet, but you're on this boat with all these amazing humans, and we all have these different experiences, and to be able to share that with somebody who understands it, it's life-changing for me, I know. And for a lot of guys, they've come up and said, have said just that. So it's like I said, when you feel like you're not going to work and you're excited to go on the next project after project, whether it's a movie, whether it's a limited time offer that we're going to do that's highlighting special operations history, whether it's, getting a guy involved in the movie industry and he goes from movie to movie to movie, and that money is life changing for him and his, three kids, and they're living all over the world. Like a friend of mine, two friends of mine right now are in Australia and Thailand prepping for Extraction 3 with Chris Hemsworth. Like, and it's going to be this insane stunt insanity, I should say, because Sam Hargrave is directing. So it's, I get very excited about almost everything that I'm involved in, whether it's helping friends and family or, you know, helping other veterans or helping a director like Christopher Nolan. Like all of those things are exciting to me. It was interesting, even though I wasn't on the recovery of the Artemis crew, like the whole SpaceX astronaut rescue and recovery team was glued to the TV watching it with the rest of the world, especially with the rest in the, it was interesting to see the US just glued to this event, in Canada, of course. But I was lucky enough to know those three guys, and I trained them for all their missions, along with the rest of the SpaceX astronaut rescue and recovery team. So everything just seems connected somehow, and that's an amazing feeling.
Well, thank you very much. It was such an interesting conversation. I think there's much more we can speak about. We just literally touched the surface. You're involved in too many projects. You have to make it easier for me, you know? I mean, I have to ask you questions about all these different industries. But I think, look, I think we covered a good amount of terrain, and especially the work that you're doing on the humanitarian side, working with veterans. It was great that we were able to highlight that at the end. So thank you very much for speaking to me and that we can have a conversation today. It was amazing. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm honored to be on your show. I would, I actually want to have you on a podcast and interview you. So maybe we can turn the tables. And you mentioned, finance, and as you mentioned that, decades ago, one of the smarter special operations guys I knew, he dipped his foot in both special forces and the agency. He said, "You want to know where we're going next? Read The Economist." Because they're about 3 to 5 years behind every event.
Mhm.
And I was like, whoa. And then all the things that involve money. So when you talk about venture capital, like we need investors for Four Branches bourbon. We need investors for, Force Blue. Like it's, and there's certain people on both those teams that are constantly looking for money. And there's so many companies that are way, way, way in the black, and they almost need nonprofits or companies to invest in as kind of a write-off to, you
Mhm.
know, not pay taxes on it or whatever those formulas are when it comes to the CPAs. But Um, I am very curious how you got from where you started to into all that. So maybe we can do something in the future.
Thank
Yeah.
you very much. It's been a great conversation, and I wish you a great trip. All right. Have a great time.
Thanks, brother.
All right.
Thanks. You too. Enjoy New York.
Yeah.
Take care.
Thank you.